Hey everybody, this is Josh Lindsay from the American Business Broker Podcast, the show that gives you full access to successful business owners and what it takes to sell a business. We break down the deals, give you full access to the owners, and as always, I share my secrets to selling a company. Enough talk, let's go! So hey, we've got Jason Judd on the podcast today. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing good, thank you.
As I said earlier, Jason is a man of service. He was going to come into the studio today, but he had to help his brother move, so he's doing it from the car. I can see his child in the back seat. Are you wearing your seatbelt?
Yeah. Are you wearing your seatbelt back there?
I like it. Well, if you want to chime in on the podcast, you can too. But Jason, I appreciate you making time, man. I know you're a busy guy. Anyway, so what this podcast is about, Jason, is we've launched it to help business owners, entrepreneurs, et cetera, like yourself, people that have started a company and then had a successful exit. So with you, I actually sold two of your businesses. We sold a wakeboard company and we sold, was it Great Clips or Sports Clips?
It was
Dollar Cuts. Apologies. So I know you had a couple of those franchises and we'll get into that. But what I really want to focus on today is just the Wakeology story. So before we kind of jump into it, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, and then how you got into starting the wakeboard company?
Well, I mean, a little bit about myself. Now, I mean, my focus in life as far as my professional focus is real estate. So real estate, that's kind of my main thing. It's the bread and butter. And then I'm kind of a passion guy where I chase down my passions. And for me, wakeboarding was a passion early on. So before middle school, elementary school, middle school, high school. In high school, I decided I wanted to start a wakeboard company. And I started working with molds and kind of making wakeboards in my garage like you would do a surfboard.
You were just making it out of the foam?
I was making them on my own.
What?
They weren't great boards. so I did move to working with a company up in Seattle, Washington that manufactured boards. And eventually, just through cost, quality, I mean, it's sad to say quality, but we moved to China in order to get our costs down and to actually increase the quality.
No, and that's fairly common. I mean, I understand that a lot of people want to do, U.S. made products and materials, but I think it would be silly to say that most things are manufactured overseas just due to cost, just due to the molds, the plastic injection molding and stuff that they use over there. Obviously, when you're in business, the number one thing you want to do is make money. And so when you're able to manufacture a board for, say, $10 versus $100, it's a lot easier to kind of enter the space. So when we talk about Wakeology, I mean, when you started this business, were you self-funding it? Did you have investors? Like, how did that work for you?
No, I was 100% self-funding it.
How?
So I was just working. So I made money and then I spent my money on the wakeboard. So I started with small, and I guess doing it in Washington, I was able to do smaller runs, right? Like I could make 50 boards at a time versus making 1,000 boards at a time is my minimum. So it cost me more, but I could spend less just to get a small amount. I was just funding my own boards, funding everything. Everything was guerrilla marketing.
Yeah.
I started really before Facebook.
You were a MySpace guy, huh?
I was MySpacing. That's how I built the company originally, was through social media, but on MySpace. And now, obviously, people can do the same thing on MySpace or Facebook.
You're still on MySpace, bro?
Anymore.
You're still on MySpace?
I am not on MySpace.
I'm just joking.
Anymore?
I don't know. I don't think I'm in your top 10 or top 6 or whatever that was.
Of course you are.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
You're number one.
Number one favorite on MySpace.
And going beyond that, so for for years, it was just kind of a slow build thing. I started sponsoring athletes. I started building the company, and eventually it started getting to a point where it was getting too big for me to keep doing it little.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I did look for some money, and I brought on a 10% partner, and he brought some funds to the company.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Two things. One, you were talking a little bit about growth. So you were doing 50 boards at a time and probably just selling them to friends and family and kind of referral base, right?
Well, I really never sold to friends and family.
Nothing?
So what I would do is I would find athletes, and a lot of my athletes came from Florida, Texas, and I would sponsor them, and then it was their job to spread the word, right?
Yeah.
So most of the sales came from their buddies.
Interesting.
So they would, go ride the boards, and then they would be selling the boards when they were riding them.
Were they getting commissions on those sales?
They weren't getting commissions. They were just getting free equipment.
Free gear.
In the beginning, and as I grew, some of my top athletes were getting a salary.
A cut?
Yep. No, they were just getting a salary.
You're paying them a salary.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. So that's how
they weren't huge.
No, but that's how you were growing the business. You went out, you found the sport, you sponsored the athletes. They would get all the bunch of free gear. That you started generating sales that way, and then eventually, as it grew, you'd have to sponsor some of these more top tier athletes to keep it rolling.
Absolutely, and that was the strategy from day one. It just grew into something much larger. So it was always sponsor athletes. The athletes knew what they got, and they knew what was expected of them.
Yeah.
They love to be sponsored,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have sponsorships coming from any of the other companies. So I gave them that sponsorship, and they were more than happy to promote the brand, to sell the boards, to bring people in the family. We started off with just a few small athletes. We grew into some higher level athletes, and then we grew. So we had our professional team, and then we had what we called the Wake Army,
mm-hmm.
which was really almost anybody that wanted to be semi-sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
We brought them onto this Wake Army, and they got discounts on boards. They
mm-hmm.
got stickers and T-shirts. They didn't get quite the same sponsorship, but they were doing the same thing. They were selling the boards. They were bringing their friends and family in. And, that it always worked. It was fun.
No, that's amazing. So I want to touch on the investor thing just because it is commonplace where businesses will grow to a certain level and they got to bring on money, whatever it is. Can you just walk me through that process? Who was it? You said you gave them 10%. Walk me through that process and how you did it.
So I'm going to have to think exactly how we connected. His name was Lance Cannon.
Okay.
Yeah, he's local here in Utah. He actually reached out to me initially, which was the timing was kind of, just perfect, where I was moving everything to much larger orders in China, and to bring in some money was very helpful. So
mm-hmm.
he reached out to me to see if I'd be interested in having a partner,
mm-hmm.
and it just kind of worked out.
Makes sense.
Kind of weird how it worked out. So I didn't really have to push for that one. I didn't have to go out and find an investor. I had an investor come to me.
So he had seen your stuff, liked what you were doing, and kind of came to you and said, "Hey, I'd like to invest in your business."
Yep. And he sent me an email initially.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like, this is probably junk or something.
Yeah, for sure.
But then we connected, we talked, and over the next couple months we worked it out, and he brought in a little bit of money, and we formed a partnership there.
What did you use the money for?
Inventory.
So that allowed you to grow and do more orders. You could go out and buy 1,000 boards, so to speak, and kind of grow that way.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
So we bought more boards. We built the team bigger. That's about the time we created the Wake Army.
Mm-hmm.
So we printed a bunch of T-shirts and stickers and things to send to those guys.
Got it. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about like growing pains. All businesses go through growing pains. Obviously, a wakeboard company is super unique. What kind of growing pains did you experience, as the business grew?
There were lots of them. As far as putting my money out there as not a super wealthy person, I didn't just have tons of disposable income to throw at this, and if I didn't make it, it was okay.
Yeah.
Every dollar I put into this kind of stung, especially less for me. I'm naturally a risk taker, but for my wife, who looks at our bank account and how much money are you spending on these things?
Right.
So just having the money to do it, taking the risk to do it, and then I didn't have the facilities.
Yeah.
My unfinished basement at the time was 100% full of wakeboards. So we were using my basement as our warehouse.
It's bootstrapping, man.
We bootstrapped that thing. I mean, we were on MySpace. Come on.
Woo! It's hot.
So all our marketing was guerrilla. Our storage facility was my basement. The money was just coming out of my bank account.
No, but that's painful. That's raw pain. If you've never launched a business before and you don't understand what it's like to have a spouse see you go out and spend $40,000 on wakeboards, you're like, what's going on? Exactly. It took us years to get the $40,000, and all of a sudden you're buying $40,000 on wakeboards. It can cause some tension, right? Some nervousness at home. I think that's fair to say.
Yep, it's always, all of my businesses have always been tougher on my wife. So we obviously have to manage that and make sure everybody's on board, at least as much as they can be. But it doesn't mean that the stress goes away.
No, I agree. I think that's a good thing to touch on, especially for businesses that are growing, is, to be cognizant of what it's like for the spouse, right?
Yep.
Well, let's talk about this. What made you decide to sell? We didn't know each other, even though we've got some weird connections through the Alta Hawks, legacy. We have some connections. We didn't know each other at all. We kind of figured that out later, but you hit me up about Wakeology first. What made you decide to sell?
So I got to the point where for me to keep growing, I had to put more money into the business, more and more money. I actually did take out a loan towards the end, where I ordered my biggest order ever. We got a big, huge shipment in, and we were doing fine. We were doing okay. We were selling boards. We were growing the business slowly. But for us to really take that next step and be a recognized brand in the industry, we were there. We were kind of this pesky little brand that was growing. But for us to matter, we had to spend more money. And I got to a point where this was starting to now control. It was no longer a hobby business. It was starting to control my life. I had a lot of fun with it. I love my athletes, my sponsored athletes. We would do 2-3 trips a year where we'd go to Texas or Florida or Lake Powell, and just wakeboard and film video. And I love that part of it, just the people part of it.
Right.
But the business side of it, because it was not my main income, was starting to drain me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started to feel the drain, the pressure of where does this next round of money come from? How do I increase my orders? It kind of wore me out, and it came time for me to think about selling. And that's when I reached, and I'm trying to remember how I found you.
Me neither.
But I found you, and it worked. It obviously worked out.
Yeah. No. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. I remember I loved your business. It was obviously super cool on the surface. I was like, this is amazing. A wakeboard business, incredible. But I remember when we started to list and sell your business and put it out there, I quickly realized that this was as niche as you can get.
Absolutely.
And what I mean by that is I've got a pretty good buyer database. I've got over 5,000 buyers in my database that have a minimum of $500,000 or more. Some of these guys have upwards of $50 million to invest. The issue is not everybody's looking to buy a wakeboard company. So I quickly learned, I was like, oh, I think it's cool. Jason thinks it's cool, but this is niche. And so the traction when it came down for buyers, it was slow. It was one of the slower deals that I've worked on. And even though I was passionate about selling it for you, I just remember that it was like, a buyer here, a buyer there, until we eventually found, don't remember their names, so don't ask me, but it was a father-son kind of crew that was passionate like you were in the space.
They were. And I remember you had some buyers potentially in New York and some buyers potentially out of Minnesota. And in the end, we had that father-son. It felt a little more like
real
what I was doing. They were going to do something similar. And they were actually the only group based in Utah. So, I'm sorry, it's getting loud. I'm outside now.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah, they felt right. They felt like the right people to take over.
Yeah. So they kind of came in. Do you remember what the offer process was like?
I remember a couple things. We had the other two buyers that were interested. And then you came to me with these people. And, they came in with an offer that wasn't quite where I wanted it. We kind of went back and forth. We kept getting a little closer. And then I remember one night we were talking, and I said, hey, if you can get this, I'm done. Let's do it. And you said, I can get that. And I remember I was probably 10 minutes later, you called me and you said, we have a deal.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. So it was exciting. We got to where we needed to be, and we got it done. So that's.
And do you remember how the due diligence process worked for you? I know that your deal was fairly simple because a lot of it had to do with just spot checking the assets that was included. So I think it was only 30 days, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a fast close. A lot of their due diligence was just, like you said, verifying the assets, making sure we had the inventory that we said we had.
Yep.
We did reach out to the manufacturers. They wanted to verify that we could continue, that they could continue to manufacture and keep that relationship.
Yep.
So outside of that, those were their two big things. I brought them to the warehouse. We went through our process. I connected them to our top athletes. And then we sent out general messages to, the larger Wake Army team. So they made those connections. They made sure they wanted that those athletes would continue to be sponsored by them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was fairly simple overall in the due diligence. The numbers were the numbers.
Yeah.
They could see the sales. So it was just, how do we keep this thing going, where it stays fairly seamless for everyone else that's involved.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize something here. One of the things that Jason did a really good job at was you weren't doing a lot of cash under the table deals. In the size you were, it would have been very easy to do backdoor warehouse style, come pay me cash, don't report the sales tax type of stuff. The problem that would have created would have been very difficult for me to sell because we wouldn't have been able to validate those sales. So even though you would have had them on a P&L or whatever, we would have never been able to verify the cash transactions, but you never went down that road. And that's something that I think you were smart for doing, because when it came time to verify all your sales, it was super simple. Everything was digital. It was very easy to verify. That's why we spent most of the time just doing the asset and the athlete verification, because your numbers were tight. There was no funny business at all.
No, there was, and I wasn't in a stage where I was trying to be creative. I was just straightforward. No,
I know. But it's just something, as I look back and remember the sale, I just remember being grateful that you kept it tight. Because there's a lot of business owners out there that are doing hey, meet me at the 7-Eleven. I'll sell you, a bunch of boards. Do you get what I'm saying? It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've met people here locally that have local businesses that kind of do that same thing. We never took that sell out of our warehouse approach.
Yeah.
Most of the boards we sold were not in Utah. So, maybe that made it a little bit easier.
Sure.
But yeah, we did. We kept the numbers tight. We kept them straightforward.
Good. So talk a little bit about this. Talk about the transition period. Do you remember how long you gave him as far as the transition period? Was it 30 days? Was it 60 days? I can't remember what that was like.
I offered them quite a long time for me to be involved. I think I offered them actually 6 months where I would
for free
be available to them for free.
Jeez.
However, they rarely used me. They kind of wanted to put their own
stamp
on things pretty fast, I found out. So they rarely came to me for advice.
The next question I was going to ask you is, we kind of talked a little bit about the transition. You told me that the owners were kind of quick. They didn't really need you a whole lot. They wanted to put a stamp on the business themselves. But my next question was, when you sold the business, What kind of emotions did you experience over the next 6 to 12 months? Were they good? Were they bad? Did you miss the business? Were you happy to be out of it? Like, walk me through that process of what it's like.
I mean, to be honest, I still miss the business.
Yeah.
It was a passion, hobby business that I had for a long time, and I grew it slowly. So it took a long time to get to where I was. So yeah, I do miss it. I miss just kind of the fun elements of it. At the same time, from a financial perspective, it was a relief as well.
Yeah.
So there was good, there was bad. I know the hardest part for me, honestly, was calling all of my athletes and letting them know I was selling the business, because we had built this family. We were truly, friends and family, and it was really hard to tell them that I was selling the business.
I understand that. I mean, and that's probably what made you successful too, is like you treated them like family, you respected them. So when you're telling them that you're exiting and leaving, they're kind of like, the relationship won't ever be the same.
100%. And I still, to this day, I communicate with all of them. I stay in touch. If I fly down to Texas, I connect with those guys.
That's awesome.
Or Florida, or wherever I go.
Sure. So looking back, I know it's been a little bit, but what did you learn about selling a business, since we sold 2 for you? But what also would you do differently? Let's start with the first question. What did you learn about selling those 2 companies?
Hire you.
Oh man, that's touche. I appreciate the nod.
Well, and realistically, that is my response there. When it comes down to selling it, and once I had made the decision to sell it, I sell real estate now, so I know how to sell things, but that is not my expertise, right? Like, I could try to hack it and put it out there and try to sell it maybe do okay, but I definitely would not be putting myself in the best position. So hiring somebody who knows what they were doing, hiring a business broker is 100% the way to go. It's what I would do again in the future. Anytime I'm selling a business in the future, obviously you're getting a call, but that would be my recommendation to, I guess, anyone would be to hire a business broker.
No, I appreciate that, man. I mean, it's a complicated sale. As business owners, we naturally have the tendency to think we're great at all things. We're selling, we're HR, we're payroll. You do so much as a small business owner, but it's hard to explain to people that selling a business is different, and it's a unique process that can be complicated. And I've spent now over a decade. I'm going on 15 years, 6 of my own companies that I've sold, 1 that I've taken public. But then more importantly, I mean, I'm over 300 million in businesses sold now when I tally it all up, and I'm still selling them, 7-figure deals, at least a dozen a year. And so, I've really put a lot of time and passion into what it takes to get these things across the finish line. So I appreciate the nod. I mean, I know it's been a while since we've worked together, but I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you would do differently looking back?
I don't know. It's hard to go back and think of what I would have done differently. I feel like I made the best moves that I could make. If I would have been able to make this my full-time job, my career, my life, which I would have loved to do that, but, I had a family. When I started this business, I had no kids. I had no wife.
Yeah.
I got married. I had kids. My life changed. And I had to make a decision on, could this still be my life? Could this be my business going forward? And it just didn't feel like it was the best fit. So, I mean, in an ideal world, I would have been at a place where the business was running itself almost, and I was hiring people that could manage the business for me. But it wasn't at that stage, and I had to either decide to fully commit myself or to step out. And unfortunately, the decision was pretty much already there. I had to sell it and move on, and go to the next phase of life.
No, I understand. And I think, you're not alone in that transition. There comes a point and where you have to put your family first over passion occasionally. But at the same time, I mean, you've transitioned into real estate. You've mentioned it a couple of times now. But you've been successful at real estate. Like, I've noticed that you are a top 500 realtor in
top 500, top 5% realtor in the state of Utah.
Yeah, and that sounds like a lot, but when you do the numbers on how many realtors there are in Utah, there's 9,000, 12,000, something like that.
It's constantly growing, so we're way above that right now.
Yeah, so let's say it's above 12,000, realtors in Utah. To be in the top 500, what does it take to do that? What do you have to do to get there?
I think the bottom of that group last year was something like 14 million.
Okay, sold in sales. What lessons did you learn when you were running a business that you've now transitioned over into running a successful real estate business? Let's talk about that.
I think just like with my sponsored athletes, making them my true friends, not just fake friends, not business friends. They were real friends. Going into the real estate world, and I was dabbling in real estate while I was doing the wakeboard company. I was doing both for a time. But in the real estate world, every client to me is a real friend. I have a hard time not connecting with people in that way. It's not a goal. It's not a goal I set. It's just my natural personality is to try to make friends, be friends. Let's connect. How do we connect in life? What common things do we have? Do we both like pickleball? Do we both like soccer? What is it that connects us outside of just real estate? And then I try to stay in touch with people, not just during the transaction or after the transaction, but forever. Honestly, you still, you know how it goes. I constantly am inviting past clients I do client events every year where my main objective is not to suck a referral out of them, is to keep the relationship alive, to keep it healthy, to remain friends. And, those referrals and those things just kind of naturally happen from that point.
So I would say, just having known you now for 10 years, I'd say that's one of your strongest character traits, is that you do have this really even keel kind of wash over personality that you get along with a lot of people. Like, you're a non-confrontational dude. You're easy to get along with. And as you touched on earlier, where you're talking about your wakeboard company, you built these relationships. The athletes liked you. You liked them. Even now, when you still go down to Austin, you probably still connect with these guys, like you said. And you sold the wakeboard company like 10 years ago. It's been a while, but you've always just been great at maintaining relationships. And I can testify, yeah, dude, I get your mailers. You and Trip, you guys send those out like every month, like all the time. But you got to be consistent with that marketing. So I respect it. But I see you. You're out there doing it. But also, you're doing events. Like, your genuine desire to maintain those relationships. And I'll touch on a story here. During COVID, you did a virtual bingo with a bunch of families. And it was like right when COVID was dark. Like, it was a dark time. Like, that was when they told us all to stay home for like 2 or 3 weeks. Don't leave your house. You'll get genital warts, that type of craziness. Like, it was a crazy time. And I heard,
if you walk outside, you're going to die.
No, for real though. It was like that. And I remember I heard from you and you were like, hey, it's crazy. But we're going to do a like virtual bingo, and you got like a dozen families on. We played virtual bingo. I think we won crumble cookies that you had delivered to our house. And I didn't have a house to sell, man. Like, at the time, I would argue that every family on that call, that bingo call we were doing, was kind of uncertain of where things were going. And you were just there to like provide a normal night for all of us. And I just think that's really cool. And I think that testifies with who you are, what's made you successful in business, but also how you've transitioned into being a successful top 500 realtor is. It's more than, like you said, the referral or the next deal. It's like, hey, I just want to maintain relationships with the people that I've worked with, that I've sold for, they've sold for me. Even if it's been 10 years, like I just still want to be a face and a number in your phone that you remember. And I just think that's really cool of you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I value relationships. Once I've established a relationship, I don't like to lose it. I don't like people to fall out of my life. And whether or not they ever buy real estate through me again or refer me again, I still want to keep them in my life. So
no, I think that's amazing. I think that's like I said, it's probably one of your strongest traits that I admire about you. So last two questions real quick. The one is, being a business owner and entrepreneur, I'm a big believer in obviously surrounding yourself and reading books, reading good material, etc. Is there a book out there that you would recommend to a business owner, salesperson, anything like that, something that you love that you can make a recommendation on?
I'm kind of boring when it comes to books, and I don't read a whole lot of books.
Give me your most boring book, even if it's like Sleeping with Buffaloes, like whatever you read.
I used to just read books that were motivational and business and strategic planning and those kind of books. The only book I've read super recently was Ready Player One, and I just needed the entertainment.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, little escape for you.
I was in it for the entertainment. I watch I don't know, maybe I've moved away from books for the motivational and for the learning side of things. I watch so many YouTube videos and podcasts.
It's a new form. Yeah, same form.
It's a new form.
Do you have a podcast that you like?
A lot of the podcasts I follow are crypto related.
Okay, so you're into crypto. That's right. You're kind of into crypto and learning about crypto.
Big time into crypto and NFTs and that world.
Okay, cool. But basically what you're saying is get out there and learn. Yeah, get out there and learn, expose yourself. There's plenty of information and there's plenty of resources, even just besides books, like podcasts, YouTube videos. Learning is still in your wheelhouse, is what you're saying.
Well, learning's in my wheelhouse, and the information is so accessible. Like, you just go to YouTube and you search a video or a topic, and you're going to find, a ton of different people, and then you can dive in from there. You find out who you like and what you like, and you keep listening.
No, I agree. Last question here is, why am I forgetting the last question? Oh, for business owners, realtors, it doesn't matter who it is, what's one piece of advice that you'd give them?
For me, and this is a bit of advice I give to a lot of people that ask me. Number one, I get asked two questions a lot in real estate from people who are realtors or looking to become a realtor. The first one, I get a question probably at least once a week saying, I'm thinking about getting into real estate. What do you recommend?
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously recommend going to the real estate school, which you have to go to. But then what I always tell people is find a team, join a team, be part of a team when you first join real estate, because then you're learning from somebody who knows what they're doing. You're learning from somebody who's successful. They're teaching you their methods. They're giving you leads. Go join a team.
Okay.
Right? They teach you how to work in real estate and be successful in real estate. So that's one question I get all the time. The other question is, how do you do it, right? So once people become agents, how do you do it? What's your advice? How do I be successful? How do I become a top 500 agent? And everybody does it different. I know some agents are just grinders. They just are on the phone or they're knocking doors, 8 to 10 hours a day, and that's what they do. And they do plenty of business doing that. For me, it's 100% build relationships, maintain relationships, treat people like friends, not just a transaction, and keep them in your life. Don't let relationships go. Continue to build your circle of influence forever and strengthen it as often as you possibly can.
That's solid advice, Jason. I mean, people are so much more important than money. There's always another deal. There's always another transaction, but there's not always another opportunity to strengthen that relationship. And I think you've done a good job of that in business, but also in your new career with real estate. You know, you're a person that comes to mind that cares about people. And I think people know that. And that's what's taking you to this next level in your real estate career. And even in crazy times like we're in now, where the market is up and down and interest rates are kind of fluid, your business is still growing, it's still stable, and you're still able to succeed. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And I'm 100% referral based, and it's because of those relationships that I'm able to maintain a stable business in an unstable environment, right? Real estate's never stable.
Yeah.
It's always up and down.
No, I would agree. Well, hey, man, I know you're out there serving the people. You're serving your brother. You're moving someone in a U-Haul, and you took time to do the podcast. I appreciate it. I would have loved to obviously seen you in person, but this is next best thing. I appreciate you coming on, bro. Good luck on the move, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you.
All right, brother. See ya. Hey, as always, we appreciate you listening to the American Business Broker podcast. I'm your host, Josh Lindsay. If any listeners are out there that want to buy or sell a business, please hit us up at AmericanBizBrokers.com, or you can call me directly at 866-224-8386.